Right, so I've been welcomed everybody to the meeting. Today's an open forum. We're going to discuss what's next after the victory of the Labour Party in the general election last week. So it's an open forum. If you want to speak, please put your hand up. And I'll just take, with no particular speaker, I'll just take people in turn. So who would like to kick off? Roger.
Yes, thanks, comrades. As you say, this is an open forum, so I'm not giving a lead off, but I just wanted to kick off a discussion with a few brief points. I think, first of all, let's indulge ourselves and celebrate. It is a matter of celebration, the downfall of the most absolutely despicable, rotten, corrupt, reactionary, criminal, reactionary Tory government after 14 years. But I must say something too that I think, like everybody else here, probably, it's we've had 14 years of that government, but and we have a huge majority for Labour, and yet I think, like everybody else here, I don't feel any great sense of jubilation. I remember the same thing in 1997 when we'd had 18 years of a Tory government, and then under Blair, the so-called new Labour government came in with a massive majority, and I don't think anybody felt any great sense of jubilation because they knew that what was being offered by the Blair government, and perhaps even less so, what's being offered now by the Starmer government is pretty well nothing. Starmer went into the election promising absolutely nothing whatsoever. I cannot think of a single policy, apart from a few frills and trimmings here and there, where Labour is actually offering any great decisive or noticeable change in policy. And yet, it does seem, doesn't it, at first sight, that Britain seems out of sync. We've got far right or even neo-fascist parties in power or in coalition in Italy, Sweden, Austria, Hungary, the Netherlands, Finland, soon, perhaps today, because we have a very important today in France, perhaps today, a far-right government in France. In Germany, the racist AfD has overtaken the Social Democrats. It is the second party. Portugal, the left has been defeated. Spain, probably very soon. The right and the far right will be in a coalition government too. And in Britain, superficially, we seem to be taking an opposite direction. A right-wing government has been swept out of power after 14 years, and there's a nominally Social Democratic Party in power with a massive and overwhelming majority. But what does this really mean? I saw an article in The Guardian the next day by Polly Toynbee, who said she was just absolutely celebrating. She was over the moon. She said, the reason why Labour has leapt from a landslide defeat to victory in one term is because this is a country whose instincts have turned social democratic. Now, there's actually, she knows better. She's a seasoned journalist. She knows very well that the actual fact is that the vote for Labour dropped from 12.9 million in 2017 under Corbyn, almost a record in the post-war period, and 10.3 million in 2019, also under Corbyn, something that she called a landslide defeat. And that's dropped further to 9.7 million votes for Labour in 2024. It'd be very hard for these apologists for the right to justify saying that this is somehow an advance or a victory. What is the reason then? Why has Labour emerged so triumphant in terms of electoral seats? Because in 2019, it's very simple. The Tories had an electoral pact with Farage's right-wing, xenophobic Brexit party, and that gave them together a total of 14 million votes. Now, it's true that this time that vote has been reduced, But the total vote for the Tories plus Reform was now just under 11 million, 10.9 million, and that exceeds the vote for Labour by a massive 1.2 million. So it's just not true to say that the country's instincts have turned social democratic. That's simply a sleight of hand by the Liberal Guardian. And I have to say that the most disturbing features of this general election result are twofold. One, the record low turnout, less than 60%. There's only once before that the turnout has been this low. And the other, even more disturbing feature is that the 4 million votes were cast for Reform, an openly chauvinistic, xenophobic, racist, far-right party. So we're not out of sync with Europe. It's like there's a slight little glitch in the process. Now, I did say I have to boast a little bit that I wrote before the election in a posting on Facebook. I wrote, Labour could gain an overall majority in this election on a lower popular vote than that of Corbyn in 2019, and certainly far lower than in 2017. And that is exactly what happened. I went on, it could score less than the combined Tory Reform vote. As I've shown, that is exactly what happened too. So I put then, the result will be in no way an endorsement of Starmer. This is an unpopularity contest in which the Tories are even more hated than Starmer. Now, that's exactly what happened. It's a low turnout, massive abstentions. It's a high vote for none of the above candidates, for third-party candidates, not just Reform, 4 million votes for Reform, but also Lib Dems with their highest number of seats in really in living memory, 72 seats in Parliament. Independents, I think I'm right in saying there were 9 independents, including some left, including, of course, a real cause for celebration and something which is of huge significance, the victory of Corbyn in Islington North by a massive majority. Near misses for left independent candidates in Ilford and in some other constituencies. A very big vote for the left independent candidate in Chingford, etc. Other comrades could probably come in with more details. So this time, rather than ally with the Tories, Reform set out to replace them, and they could very well be, because the Tory party is in terminal crisis. Already, under the Johnson government, Johnson kicked out the opposition, the kind of liberal establishment, paternal kind of wing of the party, which had really been dominant in the period since 1945. He kicked them out. He kicked out the Kenneth Clarks and the Michael Heseltines and the people like that. Completely ruthless with the opposition in his parliamentary party. And if only Corbyn had been equally ruthless with the right-wing opposition in the parliamentary Labour Party. But anyway, the Reform could very well replace. I think my guess would be that the Tory party and Reform will fuse. They will coalesce again with Reform playing and Farage playing a dominant part. My prediction, actually, which may be right or may be wrong, but I think that the next government after this could well be a Johnson-Farage government. I think they'll want to bring Johnson back because for some reason he's considered popular, and Farage, who also has a certain charisma about him, which is attractive to the more reactionary millions of the population. So, as I say, those are the most significant features. So for Labour, it's no big victory except in terms of parliamentary seats. And it's the end, as I say, of the centuries of the Tory party patrician establishment and its replacement by whether it's under the Tory name or under the Reform name or some other concoction that they dream up, but of a far right government, which will be the next government after the Starmer government. But it could also be the end of Labour too. I always like to quote the brilliant book about the downfall of the Liberal Party in the early part of the 20th century, a book called The Strange Death of Liberal England. And the author writes about the big election victory of the Liberal Party in 1910. And he made the comment, from this victory, it never recovered. And I think that could be very much the case with the Starmer government too. From this victory, it will never recover because it's got no policy, no independent way forward. It is going to rapidly lose its already very diffident and uh, very weak support within the working class in Britain, and it inevitably, and there must be a realignment and a new movement, just like happened with the Liberal Party, where the trade unions pulled away from support from the Liberals after that election victory, and particularly in the course of and after the First World War, and we'll have to see something a bit more serious than we're seeing now among the left, because there is a huge gap. There were 500,000 people who surged into the Labour Party under Corbyn. So the need, the desperate need, the crying need is for a workers' party. There is no serious left alternative now. I'm afraid, much as we all love Jeremy Corbyn, he has no intention whatsoever, and he's made it very clear, of leading a new party, even though he would have the charisma and the influence to be able to do that if he decided he wanted to do it. I'm afraid that it's quite clear that his whole purpose, he had no intention of becoming leader of the party. He stood simply as a token, and in the certainty that he would lose. Nobody was more surprised than Jeremy Corbyn when he won, and from the beginning, it's quite clear that his whole intention was to think, I cannot be accused of splitting the Labour Party, so whatever I do, I will appease the right wing. Whatever I do, I will let any left dissidents, I'll let them fall. I'll let them go, because whatever happens, I'm going to conciliate and appease the right wing. And I'm afraid that he stood as an independent, and very good that he did, and got a massive victory and a well-deserved victory. But I think it's clear that his intention is that he was hoping that he would win his election and then get readmitted into the Parliamentary Labour Party, thinking that after all, that's what happened with Ken Livingstone when he was expelled for standing against Labour in the GLC election, and was later readmitted into the Labour Party. But things have changed completely. There's no way that Starmer will allow Corbyn or any left back into the fold, unless, like John McDonnell, they're prepared to completely muzzle themselves and not make a squeak of protest or of opposition to the policies of the Starmer government. So I'm afraid that from the left, from the campaign group, which has done nothing, and from Corbyn, we can't expect any lead. I think also I cannot take seriously Galloway as an alternative left leadership. Unfortunately, we see that he's, in terms of domestic policy, he's competing with the far right. He's taken over the policies of the so-called Reform Party, of the Faragists. He issued an absolutely scandalous leaflet in the Rochdale by-election. Two leaflets. One was for the Muslim areas, saying stand by Palestine, but one in the white areas, a separate leaflet which he distributed, which said, we support the British troops, we stand for British values. There's too much immigration. We have to stop immigration into Britain. I mean, all the buzzwords of the Faragists. And so, in other words, he's competing with with the far right in terms of social policy, and he's actually at the same time trying to get a base among the Muslim community by allying himself with the Russian and Iranian ruling classes and not with the British ruling class. That's all we can say on that. Completely, in my opinion, completely opportunist, completely unprincipled, and it's a danger. It's a danger. I have to say that I was relieved that he lost his seat. I know probably other comrades may think that is overstating the case, but nevertheless. But what we can say is that the workers are not defeated. Yes, we're going to see sooner or later. Probably Starmer would serve one term in Parliament, one Parliament, and perhaps even a second. I think that's unlikely, and maybe it wouldn't even last for one single term. But the next government will be, unfortunately, unless we act decisively and fast, it'll be a far right government, as in the USA and as throughout Europe. So harsh times ahead. Harsh times already under Starmer, but far, far more worse and harsher under a future far-right government. Does that mean that all is lost? Absolutely not. Even if we get a Farage-Johnson far-right government in Britain, even if we get a Le Pen government in France, even if we get the AfD in a right-wing coalition in Germany, and with all the rest that I described there, that is not the end of the battle. The decisive battles are still to come. That is not the end of it, because all of these regimes, one thing that they lack, which the fascists certainly had in the 1920s and the 1930s, is a street army. They don't have the forces, not at this stage at any rate, they don't have the forces where they can take on the working class and smash it atom by atom, molecule by molecule in the streets and in the workplaces. They don't have that. And so therefore what we have to say is that the workers are not defeated. The decisive battles are still to come. And the trade unions, above all, will be forced to seek a political voice, just as they did after the collapse of the Liberal Party. They will say, I'm not saying that the union bureaucrats, I'm not saying that the top leaders of the unions are going to defy a Starmer government. Unfortunately, no, that's not going to happen. What we are going to see, though, is that the rank and file militants, the activists, are going to say, what are we giving our money to? Why are we giving our affiliation fees to a party which is an alternative party of the ruling class and is working to deny us our rights? We need at least our right to strike, our right to organise, and our right to proper employment rights. We need a party which is going to fight for those things, and they will inevitably, in my opinion, it may not be immediate. It may be even after 2 or 3 years, or maybe 5 years of a Starmer government. But we'll say we need to have a voice of our own. We need to have a political voice of our own. So what we need to do is prepare the way for that. It won't come from the union tops. It'll come from the active militants. And I would very much like to know what other comrades think about that, and to hear. I'm sure that you can throw more light than I've been able to on the outlook. So thank you, comrades.
Thanks very much for that, Roger. Who would like to come in next with a question or a comment, or Steve?
Yeah, look, I realise this is the first meeting I've been to, but I do have to leave early because I've got to go and it's my daughter's wedding anniversary celebrations. I just wanted, I think Roger did a fantastic analysis, actually. I can't disagree with a word of it. But what I wanted to touch on is what's happening locally in Newham. We've got a bit of a specific situation. There's a group calling themselves Newham Independents, and I think this is going to happen up and down the country. That are basically, as far as I can see, the party of the small business class, petty bourgeois, and deliberately targeting the Muslim vote. And I think coming from the north of Ireland and having seen where sectarianism can lead, I don't want it happening in this borough where I live. And I think that's what Roger said about Galloway. I think Galloway is a very, very dangerous man. I think he will say and do anything that boosts him to get up that ladder. He's already running around Scotland, or he was anyway, with not just unionists but loyalists in Scotland, campaigning against the Scottish referendum, against the Scottish independence. And I think we need a strategy locally in Newham, pulling together strands of the left on a principled basis. And this is we've got to take these people on. We can't just sit back and pretend and be kind of browbeaten and be thinking that Galloway or these independents or other people are somehow progressive. They're not progressive. And it's a big kind of it's not a complete analogy, but people that would support that could be Strasserite in their kind of ideology, the Galloway sort of Workers' Party of Britain, wrapping themselves up in the butcher's apron and parading around the red, white, and blue. I don't like that. I think it's dangerous, and it will appeal. They haven't got a street army yet, but they weren't far off it. Tommy Robinson and them, if they weren't so obviously doing coke on the weekends, could have built a very credible street army. And there's nothing to say yet that couldn't be transferred, or those same kind of people wouldn't be transferred to a Farage street gang. And this is starting to get there in a bit of a ramble, but I'm just really concerned, and we do kind of need a left alternative. I'll just finish on this. I hope that the death of the Liberal Party wasn't fatal. Obviously, they've come back like Lazarus, Roger, and I'm glad. Honestly, this is the first time in my life that I've not celebrated a Labour victory, because I know it's a movement of the class and all the rest of it. But I see Starmer as a complete authoritarian, and I see him as someone who's going to crack down on civil liberties. I don't think the Palestine marches have got much life left in them. I think he's going to go to shut them down, or at least limit them very, very quickly. And I'm quite frightened. I'm quite frightened of what this Labour Party bring in. I think that the only voice that we will have in Parliament for the short term, we've got Jeremy and a few independents. There is a section of the Liberal Party that are free speech, and we've got a couple of Greens as well. And I'm kind of glad that they did get some people in the Parliament, and that's the first time I've ever said that as well. I'm not a Liberal, I'm a Marxist, but we need some kind of opposition in there. So we'll just end it on there. Thank you for inviting me to a meeting, and let's get together whatever way we can and combat all these threats that are coming up.
Thanks, Steve. Just to say to comrades, if you want to speak, if you put your hand up, I'll take people in turn. Temos is next.
Well, first of all, I want to start by agreeing almost completely with what Roger and Steve have said up to now. I'm not celebrating because of the ascent of Starmer, and I don't see it as a move from the working class. It's a disintegration of the Conservatives that brought this on. The numbers are clear, and Roger explained. I'm not going to go into that again. This is all true. However, at the same time, I think that we should make an assessment of what's happening and what's going on very soberly, and avoid dismissing policies or dismissing the Labour Party, or dismissing the possibilities of work that we have of the processes that have taken place and brought Corbyn to the leadership, and we had all these revolutionary events that happened at that time. It's not only Corbyn that proved himself not up to the point of leading the working class. It's also the whole of the left that failed to realize and manage to organize in a way that would bring results. I mean, Corbyn's ascent was a revolutionary event. It was a revolutionary trail that we were following. And the fact that it was stopped, it's of course, first of all, the result of all the opposition that it faced and all the right-wing behavior that was despicable, and all the press and all the establishment gathering all its forces on his person and his collaborators and the left of the Labour Party, and what happened, and the actions of the bureaucracy of the Labour Party. But at the same time, we have to realize that the left has to bear the main responsibility. And that's when, in my understanding, we should have managed to form a solid Marxist grouping with the correct analysis, correct connections, and build the structures that could make it possible either to take over the Labour Party or to manage an expulsion from the Labour Party or a split from the Labour Party or something like that. We didn't manage that. And from what I see from these elections, the left is not yet able to manage to have a voice. I mean, I know that we have here at Win very important ideas and very very imaginative ways of going forward, but we are alone. I mean, if we see the independents all over the place, I agree that they are dangerous. If we see what happened, the so-called revolutionary parties that sprang up and tried to contest these elections, what did they achieve? They don't agree between themselves. They don't have a consistent policy. They don't have a roadmap for the revolution they are professing. They don't have a real contact with the working class. But it's not enough to have some people working with the working class. We have to have policies that can appeal to the working class. So I think at this stage, and bearing into mind the problems that are posed in front of us and the dangers that we face, not only in Britain, but in the whole of Europe and even America and even all over the world, everywhere there is instability. And there isn't yet a program or a policy or leaders that could inspire the working class to do something. So we shouldn't look, first of all, to make a party or contest elections or get rid of the Labour Party, but be where the working class is. And that's still the Labour Party, because the unions are there, whatever their policies, whether we like them or not. We have to manage to give our policies out, discuss them and develop them together with the working class. And I am one of those who believe that we are still in the period that we have ever been. We are at the same position of the Blair times. And now, I don't think it's more difficult than during Blair. But at that time, we could have more leeway to work. But now that we don't have this, and we have this strong opposition, not all, but this strong pushback from the Labour bureaucracy. At the same time, Starmer and this bureaucracy and this Labour Party will be under the pressure of the working class, much more than Blair was. Starmer will not be able to do what Blair did. Starmer will not be able to fool the working class for another war. So we shall have again and again our opportunities to fight them. And I think that's where our future lies. That's where we shall make a difference or we will not. I mean, we can just work like most of the sects out there, and have the same fate as they would have. I'm not saying that we should just beg the Labour Party to take us back. We shouldn't. But we should always fight together with the Labour Party or in parallel with the Labour Party with our policies. We have been doing that for decades, and we can continue to do that if we do it correctly. Whenever we did it correctly, we had successes. We can have that again. And the Corbyns of the Labour Party will come again and again and again. We are not yet at the point where they can control the working class. They cannot. They will control it less and less. So we shouldn't hurry to abandon the Labour Party and with it the working class.
Sorry, Pam asked me to take over for a minute. Is there anybody asking to come in? Dominic or John? John?
John,
Okay.
it's just a few observations over the recent period since the election. I don't think I've ever seen as much euphoria on the media for a Labour victory as I have over the last couple of days from the BBC. The position's one where they seem to be putting Labour up as this is a brilliant victory. I think we've all seen it, that Labour has lost votes and has gone from being the biggest defeat since the 30s to the biggest victory ever, and Labour has had less than 10 million votes. I mean, the reality is that there was a huge combination of things that went on that gained the Labour victory. And those combinations were, if you like, a sort of magic storm. That you had 412 constituencies that voted in Labour MPs, and each constituency had its own reasons. The majority were probably because the majority in that constituency voted Labour. But in about half the constituencies, i.e. 100, there was whole combinations of splits between the Tories and Reform, between Labour, just scraping in. But I think what strikes me is this complete lack of programme. There is a programme, and Labour got in on the slogan of change. Change for what? They're going to sort out the health service, no more money. They're going to sort out the care system, no more money. They're going to hopefully sort out the water system, but no more money. By rights, as far as water's concerned, they should sack all the water boards as being incompetent and a danger to British national health, and take them over and give the same sort of compensation that was given out to the local authorities when water was privatised. I was a councillor in Manchester at the time, and we had a huge water undertaking, and we didn't get a bloody penny from the government, and they took over what would now amount to billions of pounds worth of assets. The other thing I'd like to say is that listening to a programme today about France and the national, whatever it's called, Front of National, whatever Le Pen's party is. And it was an interesting one, because the reporter said that they'd been to a place in northern France which was strongly Le Pen, but they found that there was no racism, they found that people were quite, sort of amiable. But what they were was a bit like what's happened in this country after the miners' strikes. There was whole areas which were forgotten and neglected and left to rot. And there was this feeling, as the reporter put it, that fueled the Yellow Vest movement, of a feeling that they had been totally rejected. And as a kickback, they were voting, and they had voted for Le Pen. And I think in Europe, a lot of the right-wing movements are ones where, if you like, social democracy has not addressed the issues, whether it's in Germany, Italy, or France, or for that matter, Holland, that people have been regarded as ignorant peasants, and it was their fault. And, it just strikes me that, as I think as has been said by Roger, there's been no major defeat of the working class. There has been serious setbacks, and a lot of them fueled by, if you like, labour bureaucracy and trade union bureaucracy. And I just feel in the coming period, there will be upheavals, and I think there'll be upheavals in the Labour Party, because knowing a lot of councillors, they've, expect Labour to actually carry out a programme of social reform, because in this country there is huge child poverty, there is huge pockets of poverty, and Starmer, his, if you like, mantra is, it's my party, my government, and my. And in reality, that goes alien to what I would see as in the Labour Party, that it's the Labour Party as a party. It's not a private enterprise like Farage's party, or for that matter, what's in France with the left wing, where it's a business run as a party. I'm sorry for such confusion, comrades, but that's the way I feel, that there's a battle coming, and Starmer is setting out his position, but in reality, it's a very weak position. To get less than 10 million votes and have such a huge majority 33% is an absolute farce.
Okay, thanks, John. Eric, you're next.
Good morning, comrades from California. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is, there's a lot of detail here I don't really understand, because our electoral system here is so different. We don't have a Labour Party, even as aid as the one that you all have there in the UK. But I want to pose a couple of I don't know, in fact, but exactly even call them questions. I mean, I sort of, this is a tiny bit off topic, but it's actually, I think, very much related. I was just looking at an article, listening to the comrades talk about how support for Donald Trump is increasing in the Black community here in the United States, mostly because of crime. Okay. I don't think any of us think, and particularly how aggressive policing in the carceral state is here in the United States. It's nothing like that in Europe. But particularly given that, it's pretty horrifying. On the other hand, street crime, the decay of capitalism, late stage capitalism, is we have a very serious problem with street crime in cities in this country. And the other is this, and Roger, in his, I guess you call it a lead off, his first discussion, which I so much enjoyed, thank you, pointed out, how the right-wing parties are having successes all over Europe. And it's so obvious. The 800-pound gorilla in the room is how immigration is being handled by bourgeois governments. I don't have anything to offer in its place, but I don't know what to say about that. I'm actually a little bit flummoxed. We also have, I feel funny calling it a problem. There are desperate people coming from underdeveloped countries to the U.S. border and coming in, and in huge numbers. And the society makes a very badly thought through attempt to help them a bit, to allow them to be sorted over a long period of time. Meanwhile, we have hundreds of thousands of people, mentally ill and others, living on the streets of our cities. It's unbelievable how that's our whole social services network was taken apart in the last few decades. So, you know, working class people who haven't read a lot of Marxist theory and aren't particularly radical look at that and go, wait a minute. There are all these more people coming in, and we have all this poverty surrounding us. So I think we desperately need, as people that want to see a transition to socialism, want to rebuild the socialist movement or build a movement anew. It's not going to be exactly as it was in the 20th century. And God knows a lot went wrong with the movement that we all came out of. So it's going to need to be a bit different. But we don't have any good transitional talking points around some of these issues that confront working class people. And it's just putty in the hands of demagogues. I'm sorry that feels like it's kind of dumb. It's so obvious to say, but we really need that. We really, really desperately need that. And just by the way, in kind of closing, I wasn't much useful to say there, but it might interest all of you there to know how this labor victory is being trumpeted here in the United States by kind of the soft left, the Democratic Socialists of America, Jacobin Magazine, kind of that layer are just like, you know, it's the new day, Christ has come again kind of talk. So it's interesting, and I'm not surprised to hear that that's not exactly what's really true. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric. Right, Dave, yeah. You're muted, Dave.
Yeah, comrades, I'm really sorry. I thought the meeting started at 4:30, so I'm really disappointed to have missed Roger's introduction. So I will therefore restrict my comments to about 20 minutes. That's a joke. I'll restrict my comments to a couple of minutes because Roger may well have already said just about everything I'm going to say. First of all, I'm going to make 3 points. First of all, yes, of course, the BBC, the fawning of the BBC over Keir Starmer, the Financial Times, The Sun, and 2 other Tory papers saying vote for Keir Starmer. The Labour Party is clearly for the next 5, 10, even 15 years, the first team, the premier team of the capitalist class in Britain. No doubt other people have talked about the fact that it was not a victory for the Labour Party, the reduction in votes, etc., etc. That's the first point. Second point I want to make is about I was involved on a day-to-day basis in a local campaign of an independent left pro-Palestine, anti-austerity socialist candidate in Hove and Portslade, and we actually got nearly 6%, which outside the Muslim areas of Britain is one of the best in the whole country. That's because we started 2-3 weeks before the election, and we had a full campaign, fully funded. We spent the legal maximum, and we integrate. And I'm saying this because it's a possible model for a future united front. And this happened, I think, I'm not sure. I think in other constituencies. We had 2 types of people in the campaign. We had over 200 people helping. First of all, we had the sects, SECTS, rather than SEX. I don't think we had any of that. So the sectarian groups. Yeah, we had comrades from Socialist Alternative, from the Socialist Party, from the Socialist Workers' Party, from the Communist Party of Britain. We had those, and from the Fourth International. So we had people hugely experienced in terms of Marxist theory, but also in terms of organizing. And that was useful. I mean, that number of comrades, Socialist Workers' Party as well, that number of comrades, probably 10 to 12 of the 200 and odd. The others, expulsees from the Labour Party, people who'd decided to vote for the nearest independent left socialist candidate, plus very many young people, as well as the final group, ethnic minorities. We have a number of minority ethnic Arab and Muslim populations, but small, nothing like compared to Bolton, Blackburn, Rochdale, East End of London, etc. So we had those all working together, like over 200 people, and some people really working very hard indeed at it. So what is there to learn from that? And again, Roger has written about this, and most comrades here will know the arguments about a united front as opposed to a popular front, as opposed to even the left popular front, which is currently in existence in France. But we cannot have a small sect, although it is possible that we can set up a small party within Britain, because within that, I mean, it's classic Trotskyism, isn't it? You have to be in an organization, and that gives us all sorts of benefits, like social, theoretical, ideological, political, solidarity, emotional solidarity. So we need that. But it's no point doing what some on the left are suggesting, like they're talking about socialism group within Britain. There's no point setting up another tiny party of 12 people or 120 people. If that is the limit of what we do, there is a point in setting that up. There is a point of setting that up, but only if it does not substitute itself, substitutionism, only if it does not substitute itself for the working class. That is to say, if it works within a united front, attempting to popularize our perspectives, our theory, our understanding, our abilities. So I'll conclude by just looking at the local campaign that I've been involved with. Over 3,000 votes from a standing start, over 3,000 votes. And it was, as I say, a united front rather than a popular front. And it's going to continue. And that is where I think we in Britain should be putting some of our efforts. It will continue in Brighton and probably other parts of the country as well, possibly as part of a national grouping organised by there's a number of different groups, and the most likely seems to be Collective. I'm not a fan of Collective, but that seems to be the most likely national organisation. Other organisations like Tusk did atrociously. I mean, even Dave Nellist in Coventry only got, I think he did awfully, 2% or something. Transform did awfully with their two or three candidates. So locally and nationally, we have to build up this national movement. But I do think we must make sure that it is that it doesn't go further. This is my final sentence. Mustn't go further right than left social democrats. We have to work with Corbynistas, but I think that's as far right as I want to go in a united front. Otherwise, it's not a united front. Okay, thank you, comrades. I'm sorry if I covered a lot of what Roger said.
Yeah, it's fine, Dave. Everybody can repeat it as much as they want, because it's everybody has a right to express their opinion in the way they think best. So moving on to Ian now.
Aye, thanks. I'm still pretty exhausted after the election, so hopefully some coherent thoughts on because I campaigned for quite a few of the independent and pro-Gaza candidates. I thought it was an excellent summary from Roger, with one exception. Probably already expecting what it is, which is that I don't think it was good that Galloway lost. I don't agree with everything he said in the last few years, but I think he certainly played an excellent role in winning that election in Rochdale. It rattled the establishment. Sunak gave some of us the jitters that the election he called for July he might have called in February, when he had the podium outside Downing Street to denounce most recently elected MP, which was quite a pathetic thing, which showed how much the establishment were worried. Interestingly, the bookies got it wrong and thought that Galloway would hold on and that Corbyn would lose. I think some of Galloway's turn in terms of social conservatism and trying to reach out to different forces, and sometimes I think bending the stick a bit far. I didn't, as someone who agrees with him on Scottish independence, and I think now fewer people would disagree that Nicola Sturgeon's administration was there were issues there than maybe did at the time 2 or 3 years ago. I certainly didn't agree with the tactic of running alongside a bunch of Tories in the last Scottish election. But I think some of that divorce from the left, he wasn't necessarily the one who moved the writ of divorce. I think his readmission to the Labour Party during the Corbyn years, having been expelled for opposing the war on Iraq alongside Jeremy Corbyn, was a big mistake. It flowed from the concessions and appeasement to the right that Roger, I think, correctly was talking about in terms of Jeremy's mistakes. Also, the witch hunt of pro-Palestinian voices. It was always going to be hard to let someone with as much of a record on that as Galloway back in while kicking people like Ken Livingstone and so on out. So I think the fact that George was able to break through during this Gaza war was good for the whole movement and a sign of things to come, even though he wasn't part of the things to come at this election. And maybe he'll be back. He's got a good record with by-elections. But what I thought was particularly non-sectarian about him and laudable was he did keep on saying, I'd be willing to take a back seat. Corbyn should lead a big national challenge. I understand he's much less divisive figure than me. And I think that would have been better if Corbyn had launched it. In hindsight, this side the previous side of the election, and hopefully will now set up a new party that will be much broader than the Workers' Party, which itself has toned down some of the anti-woke culture war stuff. I'd refer comrades to Chris Williamson's intervention at the LLA the Thursday before the election, where he was an excellent ambassador for what they're trying to do from the perspective of a social liberal, who's the deputy leader of the Workers' Party, and had an excellent take on the witch hunt and did really well actually in Derby. From last time he got a few hundred votes as the incumbent, but in a bellwether seat between Labour and Tory, in a Tory year standing to the left of Labour that had just purged him, now standing for Margaret Beckett's old seat, and perhaps he'd have done even better if she was still standing and he was standing to unseat her. Especially to me, after the way she chaired that last Labour conference where they passed the rule changes on a murmur to kick out Ken Loach, but also for the 40 years of non-service to our constituents. And he got 13% of the vote, which might not sound like much, but it's half of the amounts that some other candidates were elected on because the vote was so split. In terms of communalism, I think Steve's away, but I think it's worth noting that the most contradictory result of the night was in Blackburn, where it was the Workers' Party candidate Craig Murray, who was the anti-communalist, pro-humanity, socialist, pro-Gaza candidate. And both he and Labour lost to a candidate who has been talking about my people, meaning Muslims, in Blackburn, and my people, meaning Muslims, in Gaza, which is a very damaging framing that could play into the hands of the Lee Anderson and even further right Tommy Robinson crowd that have been attacking Palestine solidarity in the movement on that basis, and that we've so far been very good at avoiding and pushing back. So they say that there were 5 pro-Gaza independents elected. I think 5 seats did vote for pro-Gaza independence. They may only have returned 4 MPs because the links of this guy who came out of nowhere and the council group, who I was in the meeting where Craig Murray was announced as going to be the candidate come the general election in April, and they were standing in the council elections then, and they were all together. Then once they beat Labour 2-1 and made Blackburn probably the most favourable seat for us in the whole country, they plucked this guy out of nowhere. He wasn't local either. I mean, the one thing I disagree with Craig about is Scottish independence. So I hope the fact he was from another part of England didn't make him qualitatively more local than the Scotsman Craig. And then they ran him, and it's a real shame given Craig's record, being imprisoned under Nicola Sturgeon, the work he's done for Julian Assange, the work he and Andrew Feinstein, who along with Jeremy was my main campaign focus in the last few days of the election, the work they both did for getting the genocide convention, genocide case at the ICJ. It's interesting that both of them faced these people coming very much from left field, though not left wing, in the Muslim community, trying to split the vote against them, to very different results. Weiss Islam, the guy in Holborn and St Pancras, was pretty much exposed. His wife was friends with Luke Akehurst, and he didn't deny it when put to him by Crispin Flintoff. But he got about 1.5% of the vote, whereas in Blackburn, I think quite possibly an equivalent figure. As Craig said, I hope I'm wrong. Looks like he's actually won. So that will be interesting. And there were other freak results. The only seat in the whole country that went to the Tories, that was a Tory gain, was actually one of the seats I campaigned in for a left incumbent independent, Claudia Webb, where the vote went 3 or 4 ways. The Tory candidate quietly in one part of the demographic, Claudia in 4th place, I think, but not actually that different in numbers. Labour, obviously, but also the Lib Dems, again running a campaign strong on Gaza with a Muslim candidate who apparently was attacking Claudia for being pro-gay. So much for liberalism. But then they did once have Tim Farron as their leader, but they also deselected a Christian guy for much less on the gay issue this time round. So they're all over the place. But anyone who's ever campaigned on street level against the Liberals will already know that about their pavement politics. So yeah, that was a freak result, the one Tory gain. The fact that Labour got 2/3 of the MPs on 1/3 of the vote. It's the most unrepresentative election ever. The first past the post system, I think, is completely defective now. And this sandcastle majority, as they're calling it, I think Starmer, for a number of reasons, the fact he's the beneficiary this time, the fact he's so innately conservative with a small c now, will cling to first past the post. But that might not be the best tactical idea come 5 years or even 5 months of his government. It could be going very much the other way. So yeah, I'll round off. I know it's some disconnected thoughts. So basically, some freak results, some good breakthroughs, but also some health warnings in terms of the guy in Blackburn, some real tragedies in terms of Ilford. Have we known that we were that close? You can come back and say a bit more in a minute. Okay, but a lot to build on, and hopefully Jeremy Corbyn can still be a lightning rod. I did get some inkling of that, so hopefully Roger's wrong, but we'll see what happens in terms of him setting something up going forward. Okay. I don't think there's any chance in Labour right now. they'll be on.
Okay. Thanks very much, Ian. Matthew.
Yeah, hi comrades. I'm hoping my microphone is working. I think just to say something about Scotland. I think you've got basically what's happening in Scotland. Obviously, is the collapse of the SNP vote, and I'm hoping my microphone is working. So what we saw, obviously, coming out of the election.
You're still there, Matthew? We can't hear you. I think Matthew's having connection problems. He seems to have disappeared. Does anybody else want to coming again. I mean, obviously, you don't have to make long contributions. It's probably to make shorter ones, so we can come back and comment on what each other says. Right, I'm going to let Carell or Dave go, and then Matthew can continue when he gets back in. Okay.
Hiya, can you hear me okay, Pam?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I don't know how to put the camera on, so I'll just steam ahead anyway. Just a few quick points, because obviously in sorry, Matthew, do you want to carry on and I'll come in afterwards?
You can carry on a minute, Matthews, because you disappeared. Go on, Carell.
All right, okay, so I'll just say a few things about Newham and a couple of things about the surrounding areas of Chingford and Woodford. I'll start with that because Ian Duncan Smith won. He's obviously really a senior Conservative who would not have won but for the debacle that Labour dropped their candidate, Faiza Shaheen, in the middle of the election campaign. She didn't win. She came third. Labour came second. Reform came fourth. But what's interesting in that area is the huge drop in the share of the vote. Labour was down 20%, which is quite shocking. And if Labour had kept Pfizer, they would have beaten Ian Duncan Smith by something like 9,000 votes if you combine the two. So the other one that's nearby there is Ilford North, where Streeting was just beat Leanne Mohammed by 500 votes, which is really, really shocking for Labour, and shows how weak they are in that part of London. The Greens split the vote. If the Greens hadn't stood, then Leanne would be something like 1,700 votes ahead of Streeting if they'd all transferred. And I'll say something about Bethnal Green and Stepney, where there was a really, really nasty fight going on there, with several candidates wanting to represent Gaza and standing on that Gaza ticket. And actually, there was evidence that a guy called Tasnim Akunji, who lives in that area and is a prominent campaigner, actually stood down for the independent candidate. Rushanara Ali was elected for Labour, but her vote share fell 39%. So you're talking, it's a very, very volatile picture. And that's true in Newham, because Newham's now got 3 constituencies instead of 2. Just to say that East Ham was pretty solid for Labour because they've got a very long-standing MP, Stephen Timms, who's a very good constituency MP, and he does the work day in, day out. But there's going to be a council by-election there on the 18th of July, and the person who stood for Newham Independence, Mahmood Mirza, will win that council seat, giving the independent group on Newham Council a bigger voice. And in Stratford and Bow, you've heard from Steve Headley, and in West Ham and Beckton, just to say that in both those constituencies, Labour vote shares falling between 25 and 35%. So it's massive upheaval in that part of London. And I mean, obviously, although I don't live in that bit anymore, I still am very close to Newham, and my heart's there, and I follow what's going on in the East End. Just one or two very, very quick observations generally is that while the press are fawning over Starmer now, that's going to change very, very quickly. There will be no honeymoon for him. He's got so much to do, and he has, as I think it's been pointed out very eloquently, he's not going to change anything. And while he's not going to put money and resources and challenge austerity and support ordinary working people, while he's not going to do any of that, he's just going to continue the austerity agenda. There's going to be such upheavals. He's in a very, very weak position, not just in terms of his voting, but in terms of his of the voting pattern, but in terms of his policies, they will not be offering anything to people, and that means that there will be huge flashpoints. Now, I don't know where they're going to come, and I don't know where or when, but they will happen. It's been mentioned that, you know, that the threat of the extreme right through Reform UK, they did get about 4 million votes. I have heard it said, and I don't know if anybody knows this better than me, but roughly 4 million votes for the Brexit Party in the past. So that would be quite interesting to know whether that's accurate or not. So I've got a question really is, what do we do now? How do we build on these fantastic campaigns that sort of sprung up out of nowhere and offered such a huge challenge to Labour? And in some places, they've actually, independents have actually broken through. Corbyn's victory gives people a lot of hope. So, you know, that's my question. What do people think we should do next to build on those campaigns and develop the idea of a united front? Thank you.
Thanks, Carell. Just before I bring the next speaker in, and following on from what Carell's just said, Wynne has he's organising a campaign called a Campaign for a New Mass Working Class Party. We do have a Zoom call on Tuesday. I've posted the details in the chat if you look through it. If anybody would like to be added to the mailing list, can you just say so in the chat, and I'll make sure you're added. Well, just to put my own pen in, I mean, I think Carell's right. There's optimistic developments from the election as well as a lot of the negative ones, but there's certainly lots of confusion. I think some of the comrades may have been in Crispin's programme this morning, which I watched, and there's just, the left are all over the place. There was very little indication. I didn't listen to every word because it's a very long programme, but the left are all over the place, you know, and people like Chris Williamson coming in and singing George Galloway's praises, and it just horrifies me, really. And it was very difficult to get into the chat. I kept putting things in that we needed to organise. People got sort of standing against each other, and people were agreeing with me. It was all so fast you couldn't really keep up. So that was my concern this morning. But also, I know there were some people from the Labour Party who I met for the first time a few weeks ago, and we're all sat around singing Jeremy Corbyn. and then I find them on Facebook yesterday, absolutely celebrating because Starmer's got into, you know, the Starmer-led Labour government got into office. I just thought, how more confused can you get? You know, that you can be doing one thing or another. And I think there's going to be a lot to learn. There's going to be tremendous demoralisation, and I think the way forward, we've really got to start now, getting people to stand together and to stop standing against each other in all these elections. So it was really just to draw your attention. Please try and come along to the meeting. It's on Tuesday at 7 o'clock, and as I say, the link is in the chat. So please come along if you can. So we'll go back to the speakers. Matthew, do you want to finish what you were saying before it being Harris in?
Yeah, sorry. No, I was just going to say a few things about Scotland. I think, you know, it's really interesting, you know, because I think, as we're seeing everywhere else, there's huge volatility, actually, now, and no real delivery from any of the parties, you know, and the depth of the crisis, political, social, economic, is certainly visible. Of course, in Scotland, you've got basically two factors. One, of course, as I say, is the crisis in terms of particularly, obviously, the impact of cuts, the machinations of the SNP, you know, and the other one is Ireland. I mean, Scottish politics always has added Ireland. And essentially what you've got is the whole question, which now, of course, you know, Scotland isn't anymore actually religious, really, certainly in the Christian sense, than anywhere else, but it still has this, you know, sectarian, what's called a sectarian divide, which is actually, of course, you know, merely about your position on Ireland. So you actually have, you know, the working class is divided on its position on Ireland. So historically, of course, the Labour Party is a Catholic party here, i.e., you know, it tends in that direction on, you know, certainly its membership. On the Irish question, you know, and the question really then, of course, comes down to the point what we're seeing, of course, is that in 2015, when the SNP took over, basically throughout the Labour Party, because obviously the failure of the Labour Party, the notion of independence as a solution to the issues which existing in Scotland, which of course was promoted by much of the left. About 70-80% of the left collapsed effectively into Scottish nationalism. I mean, not away from any form of notion of socialism or the working class as a solution to the crisis, and purely started to promote a new capitalist state. So the thing was then, obviously, that particularly obviously what you get then is the loyalist working class then splits. I mean, historically has been voting for the Labour Party in large part, but then actually split large chunks of it, started voting for the Tories. And what we're seeing now, of course, is two things. One, a decline of the SNP, both because, as we know, the shenanigans within the SNP, the machinations and so on, the failure of the government, the savage cuts, which are going to, I mean, we got ridiculous numbers of cuts. I mean, saying it was probably not news to people in England, but certainly quite a shock to folk in Scotland that actually we're losing 300 school teachers in Glasgow this year. That sort of thing's not been done before. The council is in a desperate state. You've got also, of course, now the SNP, despite its sort of avowal of the wonders of trade unionism and so on, attempting to break the EIS fella, the FE lecturers union, because actually what they did was they stripped out a load of money out of the FE sector in order to pay the school teachers. And what that means, of course, is that the management of the FE colleges is now attempting to break the union as a means of paying for that. And of course, obviously, also privatise the FE colleges, which is ultimately the aim of the whole business. So you see all that come together. And then what's interesting now, of course, is that the SNP vote declines from over 40%, which gives them roughly everything, or much more or less everything, down to 30% because of that. And the Labour vote comes back slightly up to about 35-36%, which then gives them basically the central belt back. But the reason for that, of course, is that the Tory vote, particularly obviously the loyalist section of it, some of it splits back to Labour, where it had been previously, because it sees Labour as the best bulwark against the SNP. Because obviously the loyalist working class is against independence, and therefore will vote for the party that thinks is best placed to keep the SNP out. And the other bit, a chunk of the other bit, went to reform. So it's shattering all over the place. Everything's, it's getting really incredibly volatile. As I say, under a condition of a huge crisis. So it's going to get distinctly interesting in these parts. You've also got a position where we've gone from, in 2015, there were these old line Labour Party MPs who've been in since year dot, saw themselves as being basically job for life. And that they could go in and weigh the vote come the election. All those people got thrown out 2015. Now the SNP have got in 2015. Most of them have been thrown out. And certainly in the central belt, they've all been evicted. So what you've got now, of course, is we don't have any MPs who can turn around and say, "Well, my seat is safe," because there's no such thing as a safe seat in Scotland anymore. So it's as I say, it's going to get rather interesting. I think the real question is then, obviously, what does the left do? I mean, having collapsed, as I say, politically collapsed internationalism, most of it, can we put together a decent left and actually pose some real answers to the questions which are up there? Thanks.
Thanks, Matthew. Anybody wanting to? I'll bring Harris in next, but please put your hand up if you want to speak again. You don't need to make a long speech. You can ask a question. Somebody could perhaps respond to the questions Carell's just put to us. So put your hand up if you want to come in. Harris.
Hey, hello. As somebody who lives outside Britain, so what happened in specific seats, like it doesn't, it's small talk for me, or it does. I was wondering something else though. What about Ukraine? Has Starmer, because I didn't hear the word Ukraine or foreign policy mentioned today or followed in the Guardian, mostly in the Guardian. I really didn't consult the news, but in the Guardian. Is there any evidence that Starmer wants to be something else on the minion of the US? So I saw and was disappointed by the comment. I don't know if many of you agree or disagree that he doesn't see the UK rejoining the EU in his lifetime. So I was wondering if somebody has any news about what the relationship with the US will be, if he's going to be so much on the Five Eyes, he's going to be so rabid on many people getting killed in Ukraine as Boris Johnson and the rest of them were. That's it, really. That's my question. Thanks.
Thanks, Harris. Would any of the American comrades like to respond to that? Are you still here? No, nobody wants to respond to that particular point. No, right. Oh, right, Ian.
Thanks. I'm quicker than last time. My main question, I did mean to ask it before. I think I may have even forgotten and certainly wouldn't have had time. Was about Stratford and Bow. So thanks, Carol, for reminding us of that. I did wonder what your and Roger's position was it during the campaign. Halima, not the candidate Halima, but my good friend Halima from the area is also on the call, and I'd be very interested to hear you too. I know you were backing Steve Headley, and I know he was here earlier, but was away by now. But it's one that generated more heat than light, and perhaps more heat than combined votes in the end. On the left, this actually four-way split: Steve Halima of the Workers' Party, Labour Leaks whistleblower, and Fiona Lally, the new celebrity of the newly launched Revolutionary Communist Party, formerly Socialist Appeal, and the Muslim Vote organisation that backed a lot of the left and pro-Gaza independence and other seats, backing a fourth candidate about whom I know nothing. And certainly between Halima and Fiona, there was a lot of a rancor between their supporters. I think some Workers' Party supporters may be on more the line of a certain organisation that left the Workers' Party, taking not just a Commoner Garden anti-Trotskyist line against the RCP, but the specific third period Stalinist position that the Trots were backing Labour because they were Trots, and that's why they were splitting the vote, which is pretty absurd, kind of very specific ideology of the CPG BML. But on the other hand, I think there was a real problem with the sectarian approach of the RCP, that I noted that Halima and Steve had a good discussion on not the Andrew Marr show, Crispin Flintoff's show, where they were both respectful of each other, regretted that they might be standing against each other. At that time, I actually thought it looked like maybe coming out of that, they might not be standing against each other, but obviously in the end they did. But there seemed to be lines of communication open there at that point, whereas with the RCP candidate did initially contact Halima, but Halima released details of their communications where she was chasing her up about meeting, and they never met, and it seemed all like a bit like student politics to me, actually, to be honest. And it all came out of Fiona Lally's very good interview where she took apart Suella Braverman. I mean, these were both strong candidates. Fiona from the Braverman thing, Steve from decades of activism and trade unionism, and Halima, of course, from the Labour leaks, and was a very good speaker just a few weeks ago on here from reporting back from Palestine. But what I suggested to Fiona Lally several times on Twitter and said to RCP members that I knew was, why doesn't she go and stand in Fareham against Braverman? That's what it all came out of. She wouldn't win in a Tory seat, though I saw in Novara that Braverman isn't particularly popular down there. I think she may have got 4% of the vote that she got in Stratford and Bow. I think some of it was logistical because that's where their offices are. But politically, it wasn't very good that the left was was so split there. So I just wonder what, it's a long-winded way of asking what comrades more on the ground than me thought of those observations. I think Carol was also right to highlight about the Greens, that if they hadn't stood against Leanne Mohammed, she could have won. Same with Jodie McIntyre against Jess Phillips in Birmingham. Andrew Feinstein, I saw at one point saying to a good Green campaigner who seemed happy to feed this back into the National Party, you better hope that I either fall too short for the vote difference to matter or win. Because if Starmer had got in simply because the Greens had taken votes from Feinstein, that would have been disastrous. I think he actually got a very good vote, all things considered, and it's the first, not just incoming PM, but even party leader standing to be PM whose vote's gone down, and it's actually halved in terms of numbers, not gone down by half in terms of percentage, only because the turnout in his own seat went down as well. So these are all quite a spanking for Starmer. So even though Andrew didn't get in, it was very well worth doing. And I think in a lot of these campaigns like Andrew's and Leanne's, assuming we do still have first past the post next time, there's a big appetite for these campaigns to keep going and push to win next time, and maybe unseat incumbent rather than incoming government members. Of course, the caveat for us, especially as revolutionaries, is a lot can happen in 5 years, and electoral politics isn't at all the be-all and end-all. So who knows where we'll be? Who would have known where we are now with Gaza a few months ago? But certainly in terms of building a challenge, there's a lot of things locally going on, but hopefully they can also be linked up now around, I think, still the figure of Jeremy Corbyn. And John McDonnell was saying let him back into the Labour Party, but right now I think he's the one who's being utopian, not people who want him to set up something outside the party. That's actually the much more gritty, realist position, I think.
Okay, thanks, Ian. I think it might be Dominic wanting to come in now, and you haven't spoken yet. Would you like to go next? And then we'll go back to Matthew.
Yeah, it's just a couple of brief points. I think what Ian's just been talking about sums up to me the futility of the lefts. I mean, all it seems to be is squabbling and who's going to score points for their little grouplet and all the rest of it. And I think what we've got to be considering out of this is what is the mainstream, because I think this election has really thrown things into turmoil and sort of it shown what the future is opening up. And the future is opening up is, as far as I would see it, that the likes of Corbyn or any other figure like that that's in Parliamentary Labour Party, as good as his stand might have been, which wasn't very good at all in my book, because he never really took on the right wing in the Labour Party. He never defended the left within the Labour Party. He just had a position of being a parliamentarian, a nice one if you like, but a parliamentarian, and a parliamentarian is basically there to maintain the status quo with a few nuances about, what happens here and what happens there. What we're talking about is the real need to transform society. And what is the route to that? And it's not through people who consider that their position and their little grouplet is more important than the class struggle. And I think that's what we've got to take on board. I mean, to my mind, I would see that the Tory party, I was thinking this morning, seems to be on a roll, that the official unionists were in Northern Ireland when Paisley and the DUP came up. They either take on Farage or they become a thing of history. And I think there is a real willingness among quite a considerable section of the Tory party to take in Farage. And from Farage's point of view, to have the label and tradition of the Tory party behind him would even increase his standing as a leader or a deputy leader or whatever he's going to be with Johnson, if it's going to be Johnson.
because I think Johnson's a bit of a busted flush at the moment, whether he can come back. But you've got enough people there who are, what's her name, Priti Patel, and I get the names confused, who are quite as vicious as, in fact, come out more vicious than Farage does, who becomes the hail fellow well met while he's robbing you blind. For the Labour Party, I don't see a real future. I think it's going to go the way of the Social Democrats in Europe and the rest of it. I mean, what is Starmer going to offer? He's offering less to the health service than the Tories were. That's the sort of position he's coming in. And everybody's going on about the need for a health service and all the rest of it. And all he's saying is he's going to cut it from, I think the Tories gave 1.3% above the rate of inflation. And Starmer, from what I gather, was talking about 1.1%. Given that when before the Tories got in 2010, the figure that was above inflation was 3.4%. So we're talking of real austerity continuing as far as the health service is concerned, and that goes across every service that the working class need. And these are the issues that are going to come, let alone the question of wages and the question of union bashing that's going to start up. And I think that the Labour Party is going to carry on, parliamentary Labour Party is going to carry on in exactly the way that they are, because they got rid of they got rid of Corbyn because he raised the question of a mild form of socialism. They couldn't stomach it. So that's a few points, I think. The real thing is that the struggle for the working class and where it's going to come from is going to be led by new forces. It's not a question of looking back and seeing all the failed leaders of the Labour movement and failed sects and thinking.
Is that it, Dominic, or we lost your sound? I think Dominic's connection might have frozen. I'm not sure. Right. Okay. Before we go on to Matthew, I think we're getting to the point of the meeting where we need to start making some closing remarks. So if anybody wants to sum up what they think about the discussion or what they or somebody else has said, do put your hand up. So we'll go back to Matthew now.
I think that there's another key point here, which is raised by the comrade talking about Ukraine, which is quite right, actually. I mean, as much as anything else, this is a government of war. Starmer has been openly, quite clearly committed to war, particularly obviously in Ukraine, and will go to NATO in 2 days' time in order to where they'll ramp up the whole business of war. So NATO now will be openly at war with Russia, and that's very serious for everybody. The other thing, of course, is and the problem is, of course, I mean that people don't understand, the nature of imperialism. We've got revulsion against Gaza. That's fine. That's great. But the problem being, of course, is that people don't understand Gaza as a piece of the entire picture. That Israel is one outpost of imperialism, key outpost of imperialism. Ukraine is another. And the question is that most chunks of the left, of course, actually are on the wrong side, actually support NATO and the imperialists. So we've got, coming alongside that, of course, is the whole question of democratic rights. There will be a serious effort to further clamp down on democratic rights. The rights for free speech, assembly, etc. We've had the U.S. Supreme Court in the last few days, week or so, declare the U.S. a presidential dictatorship. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary the fact that there's been virtually no comment. So the president, according to the Supreme Court, the lunatics who now control law in the U.S., the president is immune. He can do anything. Which of course is a dictatorship, reverses the entire US Constitution going back to the 18th century, and clearly shows the degree of of crisis there is in the system, that the system itself is now abrogating democracy, all of it. And that given the fact that the US is the hegemon, of course, that will have a huge effect on the rest of the world. It's not something that you look at and say, well, it's something happening somewhere far away. It's not. And Starmer, of course, is a man noted. I mean, he's noted when he was DPP of being more interested in what was going on in Washington than he was in what was going on in London. A servant to the US more than to anybody in London. So in those terms, I mean, all of that's coming down the track. And the point being is we have to build a real, genuine movement against war, because they intend to run a war, and the US is working towards World War III. There's no question on it.
Okay, thanks very much, Matthew. Dominic, did you finish what you were saying before? Because I got the feeling you got cut off.
I did get cut off, but I was about to say goodbye off. Thank you.
Right, okay. I just wanted to make sure. You just suddenly freeze. Karen?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh,
good. Okay. I just wanted to make one comment, and this sort of weaves through many of these discussions, is it seems a great concern that there is such a lack of coalescence of message from the left. It's so, everything is scattered. The issues are scattered. And so I think it's difficult to bring everyone together under sort of a workers' platform. We have Gaza, we have the social issues, we have this and that and the other thing. And then it seems, and certainly in this country, and to what extent this is true in Europe, I can't speak to that so much. But on the right, there is the issue of migrants. It's always migrants. That's an easy fix. We get rid of the migrants, you people are all set, the workers are all set, those people who might coalesce under some other piece of rhetoric or umbrella. And I just wonder, how do we resolve that? How do we create a unifying and coalescing kind of a message that would bring together workers in a way that would actually serve them? Because the migrant issue is not going to work, but it's easier than fighting for your rights. It's easier, somebody's going to fix it. We get rid of the migrants and there we go. So I just wondered what people think about that.
Okay, thanks, Karen. I mean, I think that's the question of the moment now. We can have a post-mortem forevermore about what's happened over this election, but it's really down to what lessons people are going to learn, and where the fact that having multiple candidates in elections has in some cases knocked out somebody that we really could have done with. And I think that is the big question now. How are we going to do this? How are we going to create unity? How are we going to stop this endless divisiveness that we get on the left? And I think, as I say, I've already mentioned the meeting on Tuesday. Hopefully that will be the beginning of that discussion. Is there anybody else? Because otherwise I think I'll ask Rogers. Rogers started the discussion. Maybe we should ask him to draw it to a conclusion, unless there's any final remarks anywhere. No? Right, Roger.
Okay, thanks, comrades. I think it's been a really interesting discussion, and particularly the reports from different areas and the thoughts of comrades about where we go. And what I really wanted, I'm not going to sum up the discussion, but I mean, it's been an open forum, and I think we've all gained from it. But I'd just like to answer particularly, I mean, the key thing is, what do we do? What's the way forward now? And it really, if I raise this, if I answer that question, it really means also that I want to focus on the question that Ian raised particularly, and Carell spoke about it too, the situation in Stratford and Bow. That's my constituency. And we had a situation, I mean, we have a absolute curse on the left. In Britain, it's not only in Britain, but a curse of sectarianism, of every little group and every little clique just somehow trying to propel themselves into a position without any basis of just of being the leadership of the struggle, or the leadership of the working class. It's absolutely gone completely crazy. There was a certain scope for that, you could say, 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, when really the issues were not life and death for the working class in the way that they are now. But today it's absolutely criminal. We had a situation in Stratford and Bow, for instance, my constituency, where I think we had probably more candidates than any other constituency in the country. But just among the kind of opposition, the people claiming to be to the left of Labour, we had at least 6 candidates if you count the Greens. So I don't really think we can count the Greens as a left party anymore. But nevertheless, 6 parties that claim to be to the left of Labour that were standing, in addition to the Tories and the Lib Dems and Reform, and I can't even remember who else. So when the election was first called, we knew already that there were going to be 3 candidates, one from the so-called Revolutionary Communist Party, one from the so-called Workers' Party of Great Britain, and as an independent, Steve Headley, who was here earlier, who is a former leading official of the RMT, Rail Workers Union, who is also the chair of the local trades council. And what we said from the beginning is, look, this would be madness for it all to stand against each other. There was also Tusk, by the way. So we said, let's organise a left hustings and make sure there are now 3 constituencies in the borough of Newham. We want 3 candidates for 3 constituencies, 1 each. It would be absolutely crazy to split the vote. So we had a hustings, and everybody, well, some people didn't participate at all, but the ones who did, they all spoke and they said why they should stand. And the result was, apart from a certain realignment of who's going to be in which constituency, every one of them still stood, plus more. People just arrived from nowhere, so-called independents, who were really cashing in on the anger about the Gaza genocide. So we had all of those. So we had to do something in that situation. It was, I mean, I have to say something about the so-called Revolutionary Communist Party, who were, until a matter of, I think, months ago, they were deeply buried inside the Labour Party. They insisted that it was a matter of principle to remain within the Labour Party. They had a paper called Socialist Appeal, which was every article in it that they wrote, they had to give their credentials as to which constituency Labour Party they were from. It was a matter of, I mean, it was almost a kind of obsession. And then Starmer just prescribed them overnight and said, no, Socialist Appeal is banned. And they switched overnight from a position of being oriented exclusively to the Labour Party to calling themselves the Revolutionary Communist Party, and putting up posters about, are you a communist? Join the Revolutionary Communists, and all this kind of thing. And they stood as a candidate. Now, all of that is okay. Maybe it's worth trying one thing or another. But they simply parachuted in the only one constituency where they stood. They stood in Stratford and Bow, and they did not consult any of the local activists. They didn't. I mean, maybe we would have supported them. They didn't consult. They didn't go anywhere near the Trades Council, which is, after all, the body of the trade unions and the Labour, but within the constituency. Then we have the Workers' Party of Great Britain. Same thing. They said no. The candidate there, who had played a good role before, she was the whistleblower who had exposed the corruption and sabotage within the Labour Party headquarters in the time of the 2017 election, and she provided her material to Al Jazeera, who produced three broadcasts dealing with that situation. One of them specifically about their sabotage of our work in Newham. But nevertheless, she insisted on standing. She had the only position she put was I'm the whistleblower, I'm the whistleblower. Nobody had heard of that. Nobody knew what she meant and so on. and she actually fought quite a sectarian and divisive campaign where she attacked our comrades and our supporters. We had Steve Headley fought a magnificent campaign. He but with no preparation and no kind of apparatus and no materials. So, for instance, all we did is every day we were standing outside train stations and tube stations giving out leaflets. We had one leaflet, that's all. Nothing on social media, no public meetings, no canvassing, no data and so on. And with that situation, we didn't do well. We got 385 votes. And I think that's not bad within one constituency in that situation to have nearly 400 people who were prepared to give support to what I thought was an honest workers, trade unionist, militant campaign. So anyway, the lesson from that is this curse of sectarianism has got to be, we've got to get over that. We've got to put a stop to that. We have dozens of, well, I don't know if it's dozens, but it's certainly more than a dozen of all pop-up parties, as I call them, the Workers' Party, the Revolutionary Communist Party, this party, that party, Transform, For the Many. I've probably lost count as Collective. All of them saying, "Well, we're the party which is going to unite everybody." Well, you know, we can't have this rivalry and competition between different cliques, all claiming to be the answer. What we need to do is really get together. Now, there was one country which had an even worse reputation and tradition of sectarian divisions, and that was France. But look, magnificence that at last, in the past, I mean, Mélenchon could have been president now if it had not been for the fact that all the left parties in the last presidential election stood against one another and allowed the Le Pen's party, whatever it's called now, to come through into the second round. But this time, at last, the lesson was learned, and they formed something what they called the New Popular Front. It's not really a popular front as in the days of the 30s because it excludes the so-called centre, it excludes Macron's party. So it's better than that. It is a genuine, really a united workers' front. There's only the Greens that don't claim to be from that tradition, and I don't think they can be considered to be, you know, exactly a Trojan horse of the bourgeoisie in the same way that the radicals were in the past. So they've stood together. We'll see today, rather, in a couple of hours, we'll see whether or not they've succeeded in keeping out I think we can call them the fascist party of Le Pen. But we need to learn the same lesson. I think it will happen. I think maybe it will come only when the Reform Party, or whatever it calls itself, the Reform plus the remnants of the Tory party, which will be the new far-right party in Britain, that when they seem to pose a real danger and a real challenge in the way that Le Pen is posing that danger today in France, maybe that will be the catalyst, maybe that will be the spur to get the left groups and the particularly the trade unions to organize themselves politically as a united front. So that's the answer. I mean, there's no magic solutions, but we have to campaign for that. We have to campaign to rise above sectarian rivalries and to form a real united front of a socialist united front in order to achieve what hundreds of thousands of people already showed themselves they were straining for in the years of during the Corbyn period. So thanks, comrades, for the discussion, and of course this discussion will continue in many forms over the next period.
Thanks, Roger. So thanks for summing up. Thanks to everybody who's made contributions today. We'll just go back to Roger about next week's meeting there.
Well, next week we've got a French comrade speaking. He's a member of Mélenchon's party, La France Insoumise, and he'll give us an assessment of where France is going after today's election.
Okay, thanks, Roger. Well, that's the end of the meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance. Hope to see you next week, and I'll close the meeting at that point. See you soon. Bye.